Something that can really make a difference in an academic paper is using formal language and really keeping that formal voice throughout your writing. So here's some do's and don'ts. First of all, when it comes to writing out numbers, do write the word for numbers less than 11. Now, there are different styles. Some styles say less than 100, but you'll always be correct, at least if you start with numbers less than 11. So here's an example. There were 5 puppies for sale, and Sally has 25 pieces of candy. So those are 2 sentences that would represent formal language. You don't want to ever begin a sentence with using a number symbol. So like 5 puppies were for sale or 25 pieces of candy were in the basket. Just avoid putting the actual symbol at the beginning of a sentence. You also want to really focus on the types of pronouns you use. Just use proper nouns or third person pronouns. So Sally has 25 pieces of candy. She ate 3 pieces. Don't use I, me, us, were, or you. You need to buy a puppy. I'm going to write about. Those are just no-nos in formal academic writing. There's also some things you can do to use replacements for some informal words. So instead of saying you can see, you could use one can see. Instead of using the term bad, you could say poor or negative. That just takes your language up a notch. Also, as a sentence starter, you could use moreover or furthermore. Instead of besides, additionally. Instead of get, you can use receives. Instead of gives, you could do provides, offers, presents. Instead of good, you can use prime, useful, or relevant. More replacements. Kind of is very informal. Use somewhat instead. Never use till. Use until. Show, you could use illustrate or demonstrates or reveals instead. Instead of has got or have got, just use has. Stuff, I'm sure your 3rd grade teacher talked to you about using stuff and things. So look here, for stuff you can use belongings, possessions, or personal effects. For things, you can use details or findings, recommendations. Use actually what you're talking about there. Instead of a long time, you can say more than. A few more replacements. Instead of so, use therefore. Instead of plus, use moreover, furthermore, what is more. Instead of always, use frequently, commonly, or typically. Instead of never, use rarely. Instead of literally, use verbatim if that's what you mean. Instead of gender-based language like fireman, use gender-neutral language like firefighter. Instead of abbreviations, write out the word. And really importantly, instead of contractions, write the word. So don't, use do not. And finally, let's talk about your verb choice in formal language. You want to use active verbs and avoid passive verbs. Active means that the subject performs the action. So Sam threw the ball. The action is throwing and Sam is performing the action. Passive means that the subject receives the action. The ball was thrown by Sam. The action is still throwing and the subject, ball, is receiving the action. So you always want to keep your verbs in the active voice. That's just a few tips on using formal language.